Professor Steffi Richter is Professor of Japanese Studies at the University of Leipzig. She was previously an assistant professor at Tokyo University. I've got a detailed description here of what her research covers, but I think it's probably fair to summarize it as she specializes in researching the history of ideas in Japan, and I think particularly in the post-war period. And since March 2011, which of course was the Fukushima nuclear accident, she's also been researching nuclear energy and the post-1945 atomic situation, as well as protest movements in Japan and beyond related to that. So I hope that's an accurate introduction, and I'll hand over to you, Professor Richter.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for your kind introduction. The topic of my talk today is making the invisible visible and vice versa in the nuclear age. The Maruki Gallery for the Hiroshima Panels, Genbaku no Zu Maruki Bijutsukan. I would like to start my talk with three introductory remarks. The first is, I have warned Ms. Ota about my insufficient English. She invited me anyway. Therefore, first of all, I ask you to be tolerant in this regard. Second, the second remark, on the Daiwa Foundation homepage for this Hiroshima exhibition, the Marxist art critic John Berger is quoted. He saw the large-scale paintings, panels, Ghost, Fire and Water, when they first went on tour outside Japan, beginning from 1955. And also were shown in London and outside, in Coventry. Unfortunately, I have not yet been able to stand directly in front of them. But that will change very soon, next month, when I will finally have the opportunity to visit the Maruki Gallery in Higashi-Matsuyama, not far from Tokyo, and I'm sure this will do something with me. This gallery, which opened in May 1967, nowadays houses 14 of the altogether 15 panels created between 1950 and 1982. Third remark, I myself have only recently started researching the probably most widely and long-traveled cycle of paintings in the world. The collaborative works of the two Maruki. Oh, sorry, I forgot to move my PowerPoint presentation. This is the from the homepage of the Daiwa Foundation. And it's also, you can see it in the exhibition room. The panels all together, and the links. This is a very, very interesting and good presentation of the homepage. The longest traveled cycle of paintings in the world, the collaborative works of the two artists Maruki Iri and Maruki Toshi, also Akamatsu Toshiko. I owe my current knowledge of them mainly to reading text written by Okamura Yukinori, you can see him here, and these books were very, very helpful, and now reading this, the kind of diary he has written in the last years about his very, very busy job to organize exhibitions. Okamura Yukinori, who has been curator of the gallery since 2001, and the publications of the two historians Kozawa Setsuko and John Dower. Three preliminary remarks and maybe a fourth. I want to talk about the Hiroshima panels as art, and also not about the Marukis from an art historical perspective. So what is my own interest? In the work, in the artists who created it, and also in the gallery as a place of communication about Hiroshima. A place of communication about Hiroshima. It is a problem of how the visible can be made, the invisible can be made visible, but also the other way around. How is it that things are not, that are actually perceptible or should be perceived, escape our gaze, disappear from it? For me, this includes the atomic situation, represented by Hiroshima. Atomic situation is a term coined by Günther Anders, who is also considered the philosopher of apocalypse. You can see from his dates of birth and death that he was a contemporary of the Marukis. The photo, by the way, also shows Hannah Arendt, his first wife. He also coined the slogan, "Hiroshima is everywhere," in order to express the consideration that he, and also we, are not only contemporaries with the Marukis, but also conspatialist. What is meant by this, conspatialist? Günther Anders visited Japan in 1958 to participate in the Fourth World Conference against A and H bombs and for disarmament in Tokyo. Incidentally, the poster for this conference was designed by Akamatsu Toshiko Maruki Toshi. At that time, he also visited Hiroshima and Nagasaki and noted in his diary "The Man on the Bridge," published 1 year later in 1959, the following question. But where is Hiroshima? But where is Hiroshima? It points out his doubts as to whether the remaining ruins of the Genbaku Dome, the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum, and the Peace Park, which opened in August 1955, can really symbolize or represent the city's obliteration. Can Hiroshima, even if it had been left in its devastation, this was also discussed at that time, represent the whole atomic situation? That means the whole possible doom of the world of humanity. Quote, and you can read this quote here. In a certain sense, however, it still exists, this devastated Hiroshima, namely in the hearts of many who have never seen the new one and never will see it. But they shall never know any other image of Hiroshima. And we will perpetuate this image as a symbol and put it on wheels and roll it through the world. So that even those who do not know it even today will finally understand that the name Hiroshima does not signify a city, but the state of the world, and that they also live in Hiroshima. Hiroshima is everywhere. Anders was not interested in Japan as an exotic Far East, but as a country designated by the names Hiroshima and Nagasaki, in which thus the atomic age has become a real experience. The essence of this atomic age or atomic situation is that, from a world historical perspective, humanity is now in a position to destroy itself, and from a spatial planetary perspective, that it has nullified the concept of distance. It nullified even distance itself. We are not only contemporaries today, but conspatialists. The problem articulated here by Anders as a philosopher applies just as much to what I call the Maruki Hiroshima universe, including the gallery that houses the panels, the paintings. The following explanation will be about how this Maruki universe struggles to make visible the invisible of our atomic situation, and how this struggle is at the same time not free of blind spots itself, be it for real epistemological or for ideological reasons. Uncovering these reasons in turn is the task of what I call critical scholarship. Let me start with the methodological consideration that visualization of the invisible can be problematized on two levels. On the one hand, as a systemic blindness, just mentioned. The philosopher Slavoj Žižek calls this the unknown knowns. This refers to beliefs and assumptions that we ourselves do not know we adhere to, but which form the matrix of our seemingly self-evident values. Normality, the everyday, which appears as given by nature, not as a result of historical constellations. On the other hand, it is also about intentional concealing, which can go as far as censorship or lying. The latter, censorship in particular, will play a role when I briefly outline first what the Maruki universe is all about, inspired by the aforementioned publications of Okamura, Kozawa, and Dawa. Secondly, I would like to take up the phrase missing link mentioned in your exhibition description, missing link, which comes probably from Kozawa's book just mentioned. Missing link refers to the Hiroshima Panels worldwide traveling exhibitions, about which not as much is known as about those that took place in Japan itself. The current exhibition, organized by the Daiwa Foundation here in London, aims to help change that. Maybe I can also contribute a tiny bit by presenting some of my own first findings, which could be a missing link for understanding the significance of the Genbaku Zoo in the former GDR, where I come from. Thirdly, if there's still time, I would like to explain briefly why I consider the term Maruki universe as justified in a broader sense that is beyond the journeys through the world, its impact in and on the present, especially when after 3/11, that is after the triple disaster which in Germany, for example, sparked demonstrations, where posters with the slogan "Fukushima is everywhere" could be seen. Günther Anders would certainly have agreed with this, pointing out the missing link between atomic bomb and nuclear power plants. So, the first part. The Hiroshima Panels are the core of the collaborative works of the artists couple Maruki. Four other, even larger paintings created in collaboration can be viewed on the Maruki Gallery homepage. The Rape of Nanking, 1975, Auschwitz, 1970. The Rape of Nanking was 1951, Auschwitz 1975, Minamata 1980, and the Battle of Okinawa 1984. Okamura summarized the attitude of both artists in this process as follows. As painters of the Genbaku Zoo, who were always active in the midst of society, both of them continued to look at history from the perspective of suffering, tormented people lending their ear to those who gave accounts of their individual experiences and thus allowing a multitude of memories to flow into their paintings in a multi-layered way. Nevertheless, the Genbaku Nazu do not tell the atomic bomb experiences of individual people. They are paintings that show the viewer the essence of atomic-induced suffering inconceivable to the individual in its scope as a problem of violence. Violence, a universal topic affecting human beings as such. Hence, the Hiroshima panels are the result of a process of communication and collaboration with a multitude of social actors far beyond the atelier, studio, and the art world. Okamura therefore considers not only the artist but also the cycle of paintings as part of the social and peace movement in Japan at that time. Part of the social and peace movement in Japan at that time. You can see this in the exhibition in a wonderful way. Part of the collective work of the many. In the film, Toshi is, as I understood it correctly, saying it's a work of the normal people, yeah, in a sense. Kosawa expresses this in a similar way in a subtitle of her book, Painted Memory, Narrated Paintings, and with the phrase memory vessels, Kyoku no Utsuwa. A first level or form of communication and collaboration important for the two artists was the direct and patient conversation with those affected on site. This process began immediately after the bombing of Hiroshima, where Iri's family lived. The couple immediately left Tokyo for the devastated and contaminated city and spent about 1 month helping the recovery of the victims. This the story of the part 8, Relief. Back in Tokyo, both of them, like many other artists, scientists, and intellectuals, joined the Japanese Communist Party, which had been legalized for the first time after the end of the war. It was not until 3 years later, however, that they began to deal with these experiences artistically, beset not only by their own memories. They were also increasingly concerned that even among like-minded people, even in the Communist Party, the atomic bombs were hardly ever discussed. And so countless talks with the survivors on site followed. At the same time, they started to deal with these shared experiences artistically, the second level or form of communication and collaboration, between the artists themselves, which a collaboration called by John Dower Oil and Water, literary and metaphorically. By the way, the remark made here is very important. I think I'm talking about panels, but they use the term mural, yeah, and the parts of one mural are panels. Yeah. In 1950, the first 3 panels went on tour. The beginning of a third level or form of an intensive and long-standing communication and collaboration with so many people the artists encountered in so different. These are the first 3 parts, or panels or murals, the artists encountered in so different places and with close friends. Panel 1 is known today as Yurei, ghosts, but it was initially titled August 6th. The exhibitors had asked them not to use Genbaku. In the same year, the picture book Picadon, it's also in the exhibition, the first edition, you can see here on the left side. The picture book has also appeared, published by the Communist Party affiliated Heiwa Oma Morukai peacekeeping group or association, but it was immediately banned and confiscated. The 1950 original edition is considered lost. In times of censorship and increasing anti-communism by the Allies in complicity with conservative political and other elites in Japan, the Genbaku no Zoo should no longer show only landscapes of ruins, but the victims, the suffering survivors, and also the dead below the mushroom cloud, all over the land. Okamura summarizes his long-standing research on the Genbaku no Zoo touring exhibitions in the following impressive figures. From 1950 to 1953, he was able to verify exhibitions in 170 locations between Hokkaido in the north and Kagoshima in the south, which were visited by about 1.7 million people on a total of more than altogether 600 days. At about 1/3 of these exhibitions, the Marukis themselves presented their paintings. That means they talked about them and got into conversations with the visitors. Kosaka points out that Maruki Toshi was the daughter of a Buddhist priest and was therefore from childhood familiar with a certain narrative technique. These encounters inspired them to continue working on the Genbaku Zoo. This, by the way, is very good shown in the documentary, which you can also see here in the exhibition, which today I watched for the first time, by the way. From 1953, the paintings started to travel internationally, accompanied by their creators, partly as part of their involvement in the world peace and anti-nuclear and anti-hydrogen bomb movements. Until 1964, they were regularly on tour in more than 20 countries. This not only broadened their perspective, for example, for the hibakusha, also in other regions of the world. The Marukis also became sensitized to a more complex victim-perpetrator constellation when their pictures, panels, were presented and discussed abroad and again in Japan too. In this context, it's interesting to note Okamura's comment that especially since the 1970s, the organizer and visitors, it is the viewers and the dialogue partners of the exhibitions often came from the emerging new social and protest movements. The background of the mural 13, Death of the American Prisoners of War Beihei Horyo no Shi, completed in 1971, are exhibitions of the panel 1, Ghosts, Yurei, in the USA in 1971. Especially in the New School Art Center in New York. During these exhibitions, the topics Pearl Harbor and also Nanking were brought up by local people, organizers involved. resulting then in the paintings Nanking Daigyakusatsu, Nozu, the Nanking Massacre, mural, and Auschwitz. And in panel 14, Kraus, Karasu, from 1972, both artists address the Korean atomic bomb victims of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, for which they were inspired, among others, by the author Ishimura Michiko, a friend of theirs, who had published a report on these long-silenced victims in 1978. The Marukis quote from this report, quote, "After the bomb, the last corpse to be disposed of were the Koreans. Many Japanese survived the bomb, but very few Koreans did. Crows came flying, many of them. The crows came and ate the eyeballs of the Korean corpses. They ate the eyeballs." There was another topic of violence and suffering that connected the artist couple with to Ishimura, Minamata. In 1980, they completed their mural Minamata, larger even than the Hiroshima panels. Before that, in 1978, the Marukis had presented some panels from the Genbaku Zoo in France, where they had come into contact with local environmental and anti-nukes activists. These not only problematized the atomic situation from an environmental perspective as well, but also specifically asked the artist about the Minamata disease, since they were not, according to Okamura and Kozawa, since they were not really able to provide detailed information. After their return to Japan, Iri and Toshi Maruki spent a considerable time on site in order to get a first-hand impression of the Minamata disease and the family affected by it in this town on Kyushu that is completely dependent on the nitrogen fertilizer company Chiso. In 1981, they completed their work Minamata Genpatsu Sanizuka, which Okamura describes as follows. In the middle part, there's the black shadow of the nuclear power plant and people protesting against it, and symbolically a pile of burning bodies in the nuclear flames. On the right, fishermen from Minamata. On the left, the resistance of farmers of Sanizuka against the construction of the airport, Narita. For both of them, the root of violence that violated human beings would have been the same, whether it was the atomic bomb or the problems of pollution, nuclear power plants, and airport construction. At this point, the Marukis also commented on the connection between Genbaku, atomic bomb, and Genpatsu, the nuclear power plant. To quote Maruki Toshi, with peace, the atomic bomb has taken the form of nuclear power plants. Since the early 1980s, the two artists have been in close contact with anti-nuclear movement in Japan. Now, secondly, some remarks on the missing link in the context of the international traveling exhibitions, a problem which has different causes, the missing link. As just indicated, one of these reasons can certainly be seen in a changing audience with different social and political backgrounds compared with the 1950s, 60s, and thus with other expectations of the painting since the 1970s. Probably it has also to do with changing exhibition practices, such as the organizers and sponsors of the exhibitions. Another factor that I consider important, the Marukis were expelled from the party, from the Communist Party in 1964, because of their criticism of the Communist Party with regard to the atomic bomb tests. A very complicated topic at that time. Kosawa assumes that the end of the first phase of the international exhibitions had not only but also something to do with these political backgrounds. After all, somehow this tour had to have been organized and financed. In May 1967, the Maruki Gallery for the Hiroshima Panels was opened. Now it was no longer just the panels that were to go to the people, but also the people who were to come to see the pictures. The historian John Dower notes in the Hiroshima murals, quote, "No large donations were received from public, corporate or political sources when the Maruki Gallery was built in 1967. On the other hand, there were many small private contributions. Here too we can see a structural shift towards more civic-minded civil society political engagement. Another reason for the missing link is certainly the political and cultural differences in the countries where the paintings have been shown over the decades. To research and explore all these countless private and public archives is beyond the potential of the Maruki Gallery. How about setting up an international research group to systematically investigate these and other questions, with the appropriate financial support from various foundations? Anyhow, my small finds have so far been rather by chance, the so-called serendipity finds. Nevertheless, I would like to give you a little insight, and I hope this will also be new and interesting for the curator Okamura, whom I will meet in Japan in October. So, Picadon in Rostock is what I call the first puzzle piece. In summer 2019, during my holidays on Baltic Sea, I visited the Kunsthalle Rostock, where an exhibition about the Palace of the Republic in Berlin was taking place. Short about this building. This building once stood where recently the newly built Old Berlin Palace, the Humboldt Forum, has been opened recently. The Palace of the Republic housed the GDR Parliament Volkskammer from 1976 to 1990 and functioned also as a cultural event center. From 1982 to until 1987, for example, it was the venue for an annual Rock for Peace festival, organized as a protest against a further step of nuclear armament in Western and Eastern Central Europe at the beginning of the 1980s, and as part of a new phase of the peace movement. One of its slogans was "No Hiroshima." No Hiroshima. The movement could not prevent the rearmament, but it did not remain without results. In Western Europe, many protesters at the same time were involved in the new social movements that had already emerged in the 1970s. Green parties were founded, whose core issues were and are peace, environmental protection, anti-nuclear energy and war and peace, and gender issues. In Eastern Europe too, peace and environmental movements came together and became more and more civil movements critical of the system. which then, for example, took the streets in the GDR in 1989 with the slogan, "We are the people." The peace rock festivals played no small part in this process. They are an example of how pop culture and politics entered into a new, mutually inspiring relationship at the time. Later on, I would like to finish my talk with one of my favorite anti-nuclear rock songs, and in an updated form, as it is presented just now on Roger Waters' concert tour, "This Is Not a Drill." The title of the song is "Two Suns in the Sunset," created in 1983 here in London. In my opinion, Roger Waters, the co-founder and the former bass guitar player of Pink Floyd, sings Picadon, accompanied by an animation which shows the horror below the rising mushroom cloud, triggered by a second sun. Nuclear weapons test, an emergency. I hope we have time and you has the wish to watch it. So with these memories, I viewed the Palace of Republic exhibition, then strolled through the rest of the Kunsthalle and came across this cover. I can came across this cover in a presentation of catalogs of previous exhibitions. The exhibition Picadon, Diary Drawings Against the Atomic Bomb, showed 100 pictures sketched by the Rostock graphic artist Armin Münch. Again and again, and especially in the dramatic 1980s, he tried to make the atomic monstrosity visible. He began this work in 1957, at a time when the Hiroshima Panels were touring Europe. The catalogue informs us that one of the Münch's print cycles of atomic bombs, produced in 1957, has been included in an exhibition the following year, 1958, in which, quote, the shocking Hiroshima panels by the Japanese painting couple Toshiko and Edi, as it's written in the catalogue, were shown in Rostock. I therefore acquired at the Kunsthalle as well as the city archives in Rostock whether there are any documents about this exhibition in 1958. So far I could find, and they sent me this poster. You also have the posters in your exhibition about the exhibition will take place. We can see that reproductions of the panels were on display in Rostock from June 5th to 25th in 1958. How many and which of them were shown is still unclear. Münch's 1973 drawings, Tefatu and Tina and Atompilz Murorua, are to be considered as his statements against the French atomic bomb tests in the South Pacific. Like the Marukis, Münch was also concerned with giving faces to the victims below the atomic mushroom cloud. In any case, for both the Marukis and Münch, the artistic work of Käthe Kollwitz was of great importance. Only recently I have found via digital archives references to the fact that the Rostock reproductions had also been shown in other cities. In the GDR in 1958, already in February, in the Pavillon der Kunst in Berlin, later in Leipzig, Wurzen, Eilenburg and Torgau, surroundings of Leipzig. Investigations in the National in the archives of the National Peace Council of the DDR will probably unveil even more exhibition places. Furthermore, I have been able to obtain copies. You can watch them afterwards. Yeah. Copies of all available material from the Recklinghausen City Archive in West Germany, which provides information about the exhibition panels 1 to 8 that took place in December 1956 in Recklinghausen in West Germany in the art gallery, including written recollections of both artists about the process of creation of the 8 paintings shown in English and in German translation. I would be happy to discuss maybe further in the discussion. I also brought a catalog booklet that I could recently obtain via online. A similar thing you have here in the exhibition too. Yeah. Both Recklinghausen is also mentioned in the text written by Okamura and Kozawa, but only the place, the name of the city. The Maruki universe, finally, I would like to build a bridge into the present. I quoted Dower. No large donations were received from public, corporate or political sources when the Maruki Gallery was built in 1967. On the other hand, there were many small private contributions. This allows the gallery to be a thorn in the flesh with its exhibitions and accompanying events time and again. One striking example is the reaction to the triple disaster in March 2011, especially to the accident of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant and its traumatic consequences for the entire country and beyond, and thus to the atomic situation in general. While the exhibition visualizing the atomic bomb 1945 to 1970, Genbaku or Miru, planned for April 2011 at the Meguro Tokyo Municipal Museum, was cancelled, as they said, out of considerations for the victims. Okamura speaks of censorship in this case. The Maruki Gallery reacted promptly by the organization of an exhibition on the lives of residents in a village contaminated by radioactivity by the exploded Chernobyl reactor in 1986. Thus, after 3/11, the gallery of the Hiroshima Panels has become a place for art where these controversial issues are taken up, presented and discussed. Increasingly also with artists who attract now young people to the Higashi Matsuyama. Let me mention 2 examples. The art historian, painter and musician Tsuboi Akira and the artist group Chimpon. With his painted story Mushubutsu, No Owner Substance, Tsuboi wants to visualize the attempt of the electric power company TEPCO, the operator of the damaged nuclear power plant, to make itself invisible. The story is based on a true incident that TEPCO wanted to evade its responsibility for the decontamination of a golf course in Fukushima Prefecture. The radioactive substances found there were declared ownerless by the company. That means not belonging to anyone, in Japanese Mushubutsu. Tsuboi, who grew up in the Fukushima Prefecture, picked up the news in the media and started his oil-based paintings on plywood panels. Deserted communities, now populated by animals, in the immediate vicinity of Fukuichi, evacuees suffering from loneliness and discrimination in their emergency shelters, decontaminating contract workers struggling with nuclear waste and other dystopian sceneries. Tsuboi presents the paintings at demonstrations in Shibuya Station in front of the huge Okamoto Taro mural, Ashita no Shinna, Myths of Tomorrow, and other public spaces. The encounters he had with people who paused and looked for a moment inspired him to create further paintings. Soon he also addressed other problems of the modern colonial past that had remained unresolved by the Japanese state, such as forced prostitution and forced labor. As once the case with the artist couple Maruki, his paintings and topics are expanding in series, and his work also are now being noticed internationally. Tsuboi's Mushibutsu was exhibited in at the Maruki Gallery for 2.5 months at the beginning of 2013, and talk events with him also took place. Mushibutsu then grew to 11 paintings, and so his work was again in the Maruki Gallery in 2016. Mushibutsu 2016. Chimpom was also given space in the gallery for their critically provocative work. Level 7 Feet Hiroshima was the title of the exhibition in December 2011. The first opportunity, to quote from the homepage, for Chimpon to show all of their works on the topic of Japan's relationship with nuclear weapons and radiation from Hiroshima to Fukushima. Don't Follow the Wind is probably the best known project since then. This collective work is characterized as an ongoing, inaccessible exhibition which has started in 2015. The artists have exhibited all the exhibits in the exclusion zone around Fukushima, where they will remain inaccessible to the public until the access restrictions are lifted, perhaps 5 years, 10 years, or decades, a period of time that could stretch beyond our lifetime. Making the invisible visible is done here by making the visible invisible, which only sounds paradoxical, but it is not. Understandably, this project does not meet with much sympathy from the authorities in Japan, especially in the region. One last thought. Artistic freedom, thanks to no large donations received from public, corporate, or political sources, it does have a price. It does has its flip side: constant financial precariousness. Time and again, there are appeals for donations to avert the threat of closure, to restore the artworks housed there, because not only the ravages of time, but also their pilgrimages have left their traces. About the extensive restoration work, you can find more information on the YouTube channel of the Maruki Gallery for the Hiroshima Panels. On August 1st, 2021, the Tokyo Shimbun reported that the construction of a new building is planned for this extensive and expensive restoration work. Donations are also being requested for this. I would be pleased if my talk today could inspire you to participate in supporting the gallery, that 65-year-old Maruki universe. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your patience.